A man discovers his wife's hidden past, and what he finds will shock him forever. Michael thought he knew everything about his wife. Their love story felt like fate, effortless, perfect. But when a hidden truth from her past comes to light, his entire world is turned upside down. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, do you believe every person has a secret past? And if you love gripping stories, don't forget to like this video to support the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Michael had always considered his marriage to Sophia to be the bedrock of his life. When they met, it felt like the universe had aligned. She was kind, thoughtful, and beautiful in a way that took him by surprise. Their connection was instant, a meeting of minds and hearts. They shared laughter, passions, and an undeniable bond. In every way, Sophia was the woman he had always dreamed of, a perfect match. Their life together felt effortless, like a storybook. But, as with most fairy tales, their perfect life had its hidden depths, quiet, unnoticed shadows lurking just out of sight. Michael had never been the type to pry too much into the past of those he loved. He believed in letting people be who they were now, in this moment. Sophia's past, as far as he knew, was like everyone else's. A series of experiences, both good and bad, that made her who she was today. What Michael didn't realize, however, was how much of Sophia's past was still locked away. The secrets she had kept buried were ones she had carefully hidden from him. She had never spoken about her family, her life before they met, or certain periods in her past. At first, Michael thought it was nothing more than the privacy everyone deserved. He respected that. But after years of marriage, he realized that Sophia wasn't just private. She was closed off, distant when certain topics came up. It wasn't until one rainy Saturday afternoon that Michael began to notice just how much of Sophia's past was concealed from him. He had always been a man of order, keeping everything in its place, which is why he took such pride in maintaining their home. It was his sanctuary, a place where everything had its place. But while organizing the attic, Michael came across a box of old letters and photographs. They were tucked away in the corner, hidden under layers of dust. Curious, he pulled the box out and began going through the contents. Most of it was mundane, old birthday cards, family snapshots, and letters from her friends. There were keepsakes from her childhood and college years. But as Michael flipped through the papers, one envelope caught his eye. It was yellowed with age, the corners crinkled, and it was addressed to Sophia, written in elegant handwriting that wasn't hers. The letter was old, dated several years before they had even met. Intrigued, Michael opened it, and as his eyes skimmed the words, his stomach dropped. The letter was from a man named Marcus. The intimacy in the letter sent an icy shiver down Michael's spine. The man professed deep affection for Sophia, calling her his greatest love and talking about plans for a future together. The language was passionate, almost possessive, and it was clear from the letter that this wasn't just a passing romance. This was a relationship that had meant something significant to Sophia. As Michael continued reading, he couldn't help but feel a mix of disbelief and unease. The letter spoke of regrets, of promises to reunite, and of a life they would someday build together. Promises that apparently had never come to fruition. Michael's mind began to race. Who was this Marcus? Why had Sophia never mentioned him? And why, of all things, had this letter been hidden away? Michael's hands were trembling now as he finished the letter. He glanced around the attic, his mind spinning. It felt as though the foundation of everything he had built with Sophia was suddenly crumbling. She had never mentioned Marcus, never spoken of a relationship so intense that it seemed to define her past. He had no idea why this was the first time he was hearing about it. But he knew one thing for certain. Something about Sophia's past was hidden, something she had never told him. His heart raced with the need to understand, to confront her. He didn't know what he was expecting from the conversation. Would she tell him everything? Would she even know how to explain the depths of her past? As much as Michael prided himself on being understanding, this secret was unlike any he had encountered before. He felt a wave of betrayal wash over him, but mixed with that was an undeniable curiosity, a desire to know the truth, no matter how painful. He stood up abruptly, the letter still clutched in his hand. He wasn't sure if he was angry or hurt or both. As he made his way down the stairs, the reality of what he had discovered hit him harder with each step. The life he thought he had built, the woman he thought he knew, now seemed so much more complicated. It was as if this letter had shattered a part of their marriage that he hadn't even known was fragile. He didn't know what Sophia had been hiding, but he was certain it wasn't just Marcus she had kept from him. There were other things from a life she never wanted him to know about. But why? Why had she kept this from him? When he reached the kitchen, Sophia was standing at the counter, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked up when she heard him enter, her smile fading slightly as she took in his serious expression. "Michael, what's wrong?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. For a moment, Michael couldn't bring himself to speak. He stood there, holding the letter in his hand, his chest tight. The words felt too heavy to say. How could he ask her about Marcus without sounding accusatory? How could he confront her without turning everything between them upside down? Finally, he found his voice. "Sophia, I found something in the attic." She looked at him, her face going pale. "What did you find?" Michael held up the letter, and Sophia's expression shifted instantly. A flicker of fear crossed her face, and in that moment she knew exactly what he was talking about. His heart pounded as he handed her the letter. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it from him, her gaze dropping to the words on the page. "Sophia," Michael said, his voice tight, "who is Marcus? Why haven't you ever told me about him?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the letter, her silence deafening. Michael could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them, the words unspoken but hanging heavily between them. He could feel her pulling away, but he needed the truth. He needed to understand what this meant. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Michael, I never wanted you to find out about Marcus. There's so much I've never told you, things I thought I'd buried." The silence between them was deafening. Michael stood in the kitchen, his heart racing, his stomach twisted with uncertainty. Sophia, the woman he thought he knew inside and out, stood across from him, the letter still in her hands. Her fingers were curled tightly around the paper, as if trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. Her gaze never met his. She stared down at the words, unable to look him in the eye. Michael took a deep breath and forced himself to speak, his voice shaky with the weight of the moment. "Sophia, who is Marcus?" he asked again, his words thick with hurt and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me about him? Why hide something like this from me?" Sophia's breath hitched as she glanced up at him, her eyes brimming with something Michael couldn't read. Fear? Guilt? Maybe both. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, just looked at him, as if searching for the right words, or maybe for the courage to face the truth. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders slumping in resignation. "I didn't want you to know, Michael. I didn't want you to see me as someone different. Not the woman you thought I was." The confession stung more than Michael had anticipated. He felt a sharp pang in his chest as he processed her words. The woman he had married, the woman he had loved, was someone he hadn't fully known. The discovery of Marcus was just the beginning of a truth he wasn't sure he could bear. "You didn't think I'd understand?" Michael asked, his voice quieter now, tinged with disbelief. "You didn't think I'd be able to accept your past?" Sophia's lips quivered. "It wasn't just my past, Michael. It was my mistakes. I was ashamed of it, ashamed of the life I led before I met you. Marcus, he wasn't just a man I loved, Michael. He was the reason I walked away from everything I knew. He was part of a world I should have never gotten involved in." Michael's mind spun as he tried to piece together what she was saying. Part of him wanted to scream, to demand every last detail, but another part, maybe the part that still loved her, wanted to hear it from her, wanted to understand. He stepped forward, reaching out to touch her arm gently, trying to find the words to break through the wall she had built around herself. "Tell me," he said softly, "what happened between you two?" "I need to know the truth, Sophia." Sophia let out a shaky breath and slowly sat down at the kitchen table, her hands still clutching the letter as though it could anchor her to something stable. Michael sat across from her, watching as she gathered the strength to continue. "I was young," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "I was in my early 20s when I met Marcus. He was everything I thought I wanted at the time. Charming, successful, and confident. He swept me off my feet, made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. But there was more to him than that. He was part of a world I wasn't prepared for, a world of money, power, and manipulation." She paused, her gaze shifting to the window as if lost in the memory. Michael felt a pang of anger at the thought of this man who had taken advantage of her, who had introduced her to a life full of deceit. But he stayed silent, letting her speak, knowing she needed to get it out. "He promised me a future, Michael," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "A life I thought I wanted. Luxury, freedom, excitement. But I didn't realize that the price of that life was something much darker. Marcus wasn't just about the glamour. He had ties to people and things I didn't understand at the time. Illegal activities, dangerous people, things I never should have gotten involved in. But I was too blinded by the illusion of wealth and power." Michael sat still, absorbing the weight of her words. His anger shifted into something else, something that felt like heartbreak, a deep sadness for the woman who had been taken in by someone who had promised her everything, but had delivered nothing but lies. "Did you know what you were getting into?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling. "Did you know what he was involved in?" Sophia nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. "At first, no. I thought it was all above board. Business dealings, investments, the kind of stuff people like Marcus were involved in. But then I found out about the money laundering, the shady deals with criminals. I should have left then, Michael. I should have walked away, but I couldn't. I was in too deep. He made me believe that I couldn't leave him, that I couldn't live without the life he was offering me." Her words hit Michael like a tidal wave. He couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe that the woman he had married had once been caught in the web of something so dangerous. It wasn't just a love affair. It was an entanglement with something far darker. "So what happened? How did you get out of it?" Michael asked, his voice barely a whisper. His heart ached for her, for the woman she had been, caught in a situation she couldn't control. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, as if the memory itself was painful to recall. "I realized what I was doing, what I was becoming, and I couldn't live with it anymore. But leaving him wasn't easy. He threatened me, Michael. He made me think that if I walked away, I would lose everything. He used me, controlled me, until one day, I found the courage to leave. I walked away from Marcus, from the life he had promised me. I left everything behind, money, status, connections, and I never looked back." Michael stared at her, the weight of her confession sinking in. He wanted to believe her, wanted to understand that the woman sitting before him was not the same person who had been caught in Marcus's grip. But there was a part of him that still felt betrayed, still unsure of what this all meant. "Sophia, why didn't you tell me? Why hide this from me?" Michael asked, his voice breaking with the pain of her secrecy. "I would have understood. I would have helped you. Why keep this from me?" Sophia looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "Because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now, Michael. I didn't want you to see me as someone broken, someone who made such terrible choices. I thought I could leave it all behind and move on. I thought you would never need to know." Her words hit Michael like a punch to the chest. She had carried this weight alone, kept it buried inside, convinced that she couldn't trust him with her truth. And now, as he sat there watching her, he realized how much her silence had cost them. The years of marriage, the love they had built, it had all been built on half-truths, on things left unsaid. He reached across the table and took her hand, his touch gentle. "I'm not angry at you, Sophia. I'm hurt, yes. But I'm not angry. You were trying to protect us, protect me from a past I didn't know. But now, we have to face it, together." Sophia nodded, her tears falling freely now. "I know. I just wanted to be the woman you thought I was. I didn't want to be defined by my mistakes." Michael squeezed her hand. "You're not defined by them. You're defined by who you are now. And I'm still here. We'll face this together, no matter what. The next few days felt like an emotional roller coaster. After Sophia's confession, Michael struggled to process everything he had learned about her past. There were moments when his anger flared, when the hurt seemed too deep to bear. He replayed their entire relationship, searching for signs, trying to understand how he had missed the hidden layers of Sophia's life. His mind raced with questions. Was she still hiding things? Had he truly known her? But then there were moments of clarity, when he reminded himself that the woman sitting across from him was not the same person she had been when she was with Marcus. She was someone who had turned her life around, someone who had built a new identity far away from the shadows of her past. He loved her. He had to remind himself of that. But the truth was, the past didn't just vanish. The ripple effects of Sophia's earlier life were about to crash into theirs in a way neither of them expected. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon when the doorbell rang, just as Sophia was putting dinner together. She glanced at Michael with a puzzled expression as he walked toward the door, his mind already questioning who it could be. The house had been quiet, peaceful even, since their confrontation. No more surprises, or so they had thought. When Michael opened the door, his eyes locked onto the figure standing there, and for a split second, time seemed to stand still. The man on the doorstep was tall, with dark, intense eyes and an air of arrogance that made Michael's blood run cold. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his presence commanding attention. "Michael?" the man asked, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "I'm Marcus." Sophia, who had been walking toward the door, froze when she heard his name. The blood drained from her face, her body tensing as if she had been struck by a blow. Michael turned to look at her, his confusion turning into a mixture of anger and fear. "What is he doing here?" Michael's voice was tight, barely able to hold back the fury bubbling inside him. The man, Marcus, smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in it, just a coldness that made Michael's chest tighten. "I'm afraid we need to talk, Sophia," Marcus said, not looking at Michael, but focusing all his attention on her. "It's been a long time, but I've come to collect what's mine." Sophia's heart sank. She knew this moment would come. She had known it in the back of her mind for years. The past never really let you go, no matter how hard you tried to leave it behind. She opened her mouth to speak, but Michael cut her off. "Whatever this is, Marcus, it doesn't involve me or Sophia anymore," Michael said, his voice low, dangerous. "You need to leave." Marcus's gaze flicked to Michael, his expression unreadable. "I'm afraid it's not that simple," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "You see, Sophia owes me. She took something from me when she walked away, and I intend to make sure that I get it back." Sophia stepped forward, trying to steady her breath, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. "Marcus, please," she said, her voice softer but still firm. "I'm done with that life. I left. You have nothing over me anymore." Marcus chuckled, a sound that sent a chill down Michael's spine. "Oh, I beg to differ. You see, Sophia, there's still something you haven't accounted for. Something you didn't tell your dear husband about." His words hung in the air, thick with implications. Sophia's heart raced. She knew what he meant. There was something she hadn't told Michael. A secret buried so deep, so tied to her past with Marcus, that she could never bring herself to share it. But now, Marcus was here, and he wasn't going to let it stay buried any longer. Michael looked between the two of them, the pieces starting to click together in his mind. He could feel the tension rising in the room, the unease gnawing at him. "Sophia, what is he talking about?" he asked, his voice strained. His eyes flicked back to Marcus. "What is it you're holding over her? What does she owe you?" Sophia's throat tightened, and for a moment she felt like she was choking. She had to tell him. She had to face the truth. The secret she had kept from Michael for so long, one she was terrified to admit, one that might destroy everything they had, was finally coming to light. She swallowed hard, meeting Michael's gaze. There's something I never told you," she whispered. Something Marcus is threatening to expose if I don't give him what he wants." Michael's heart pounded in his chest. His pulse raced and his hands clenched into fists. He didn't know if he was ready to hear this. He didn't know if he could handle it. Sophia turned her attention back to Marcus, her voice shaky but firm. "I don't owe you anything anymore, Marcus. I'm done with you. I'm done with the past." Marcus smirked, unfazed by her words. "You think it's that easy?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "You took something from me, Sophia, and I'm here to collect." Michael stepped forward, his body tensed, ready to confront Marcus. He wasn't going to let this man intimidate him, not after everything that had already been revealed. "What is it, Marcus?" he demanded. "What does she owe you?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, plain envelope. He held it out toward Sophia, a smug grin on his face. "You'll find out soon enough," Marcus said, his tone dripping with malice. "This is just the beginning. If you don't pay what you owe, things will get complicated." Sophia reached for the envelope, her hands shaking. She looked at Michael, who stood there, his fists clenched, his face a mask of confusion and anger. She could see the betrayal in his eyes, the hurt, and it cut deeper than anything she had ever felt. "I'll take care of this, Michael," Sophia said softly, though she wasn't sure if she believed her own words. "I promise you, this is the last time I will deal with him." But Michael's eyes were clouded with suspicion. "What is he threatening? What's in that envelope, Sophia?" he demanded, his voice trembling with fear. "What have you been hiding from me?" Sophia looked at Marcus, her heart in her throat. She knew the time had come to tell Michael everything. There was no more hiding, no more running from the truth. With a steadying breath, she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "The money Marcus is threatening to take, it's tied to illegal dealings I was involved in before we met. It's not just money, Michael, it's something far worse, and Marcus will stop at nothing to make sure I give it back." The air in the room felt thick, charged with tension. Marcus stood there, his presence looming like a dark cloud, while Michael struggled to comprehend what was unfolding before him. Sophia's confession hung in the air, a weight that neither of them could escape. For a moment, Michael was frozen, unable to process what she had just admitted. His mind raced, trying to piece together the life he had built with Sophia and the life she had hidden from him. Sophia turned to Michael, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with regret and fear. She could see the shock on his face, the hurt she had never wanted to cause. She reached out to him, her hand trembling, but he stepped back, putting distance between them. "Michael, please," she whispered. "I never wanted you to know this. I never wanted you to be involved in any of this." But Michael couldn't move. He couldn't bring himself to approach her. The weight of the truth had hit him harder than he could have ever anticipated. Everything about Sophia, everything he had thought he understood, was now in question. "Why didn't you tell me, Sophia?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse. "Why keep this from me? All this time, you've been hiding this from me, from us. We've built a life together, and I thought we were honest with each other." Sophia's eyes welled with tears as she struggled to find the words. She had always feared this moment, the moment when her past would catch up to her, when the secrets she had worked so hard to bury would be exposed. "I was trying to protect you," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want you to look at me like this. I didn't want you to see me as someone broken, someone who had made such terrible choices. I thought if I could just leave it behind, we could move forward. But Marcus wouldn't let me forget. He's been threatening me for months, and now he's here. He wants what's his, Michael." Michael took a step back, his chest tight with the realization of how deep Sophia's past truly went. He didn't know how to feel, betrayed, confused, scared. All at once, the life he thought he knew seemed to be crumbling before him, and he was left trying to pick up the pieces. "You've been living with this fear, this guilt, all this time?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "And you never told me? You've been hiding this from me. Us, like it was nothing?" Sophia looked down at the envelope Marcus had given her, still clutched in her hand, the weight of the past pressing down on her. She could feel the walls closing in around her, the suffocating sense of dread growing with every second that passed. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "I didn't want to lose you, Michael. I thought if I could keep my past buried, if I could keep you from knowing, we could have a future. But now everything's falling apart. The silence between them was suffocating. Michael ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady himself. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to support her, to help her, but everything felt so overwhelming. He had built a life with Sophia, a life based on love and trust, and now that foundation was cracked. I can't just ignore this, Sophia, Michael said, his voice low but firm. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about what's out there, what Marcus is threatening, what's in that envelope. What are we dealing with here? Sophia hesitated, her gaze flicking nervously to Marcus, who stood by the door, watching the exchange with a smirk that made Michael's blood boil. The man's presence was a reminder of everything that had gone wrong, of everything that had been hidden from him. He had always believed that they had built their life on trust, but now it felt as though that trust had been shattered in an instant. Sophia took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she finally spoke the truth. The money Marcus is threatening to take, it's not just about cash, Michael. It's connected to something bigger. When I was with Marcus, I was involved in illegal activities. Money laundering, things I never thought I'd be a part of. And now, Marcus is demanding a cut. He wants me to return what I took. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as the gravity of her words sank in. Illegal activities? Money laundering? He hadn't wanted to believe it, but it was all coming into focus now. The life Sophia had left behind wasn't just a romantic mistake. It was dangerous, illegal, and something that could pull them both into a world they didn't belong in. Are you saying that Marcus could destroy us? Michael asked, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. That he could ruin everything we've worked for? Sophia nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. Yes. If he doesn't get what he wants, he'll expose everything. My involvement, our connection to him. I don't know what he'll do. I'm scared, Michael. I'm scared for you, for us. Michael's mind raced. He could see the way Marcus was watching them, his cold, calculating eyes never leaving them. It was clear now that Marcus wasn't just a man from her past. He was a threat, someone who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I'll handle this, Michael said suddenly, his voice steadying with determination. We'll go to the authorities. We'll deal with him. I'm not going to let him ruin our lives. I won't let him control us, Sophia. Sophia looked at him, her face filled with disbelief. Michael, you don't understand. This isn't something we can just walk away from. Marcus has connections. He's dangerous. I don't want you to get caught in this too. Michael's expression softened as he reached out to take her hand. I'm in this with you, Sophia. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this. The relief that washed over her was almost too much to bear. But even in that moment of comfort, she knew that their lives were about to change forever. The past she had tried so hard to bury had come crashing back into their world, and there was no turning back. The next steps they took would determine everything. The days that followed were a blur of decisions, fear, and uncertainty. The shock of Marcus's sudden return, coupled with the revelation of Sophia's dark past, weighed heavily on both of them. For the first time in their marriage, their world felt fragile. The foundation of trust they had built together had been shaken, and they both had to navigate the tangled mess of emotions, secrets, and danger that loomed over them. Michael stood by Sophia, though the strain was evident in his eyes. He loved her, but the past, with all its hidden corners, kept pulling at him. They knew what they had to do: go to the authorities, report Marcus, and try to put an end to the threat once and for all. But deep down, they both understood that even if they managed to silence Marcus, the true work of healing would lie in the fragile rebuilding of their relationship. They couldn't just erase the truth of what had happened. One evening, after a long day of dealing with legal proceedings and Marcus's manipulative threats, Michael and Sophia found themselves sitting on the same porch where they had once shared quiet evenings together. The night had grown cooler, and the stars glimmered faintly in the sky. It was a peaceful scene, one that felt at odds with the chaos they had been living through. Yet, in the stillness, there was something that began to feel almost comforting. Sophia sat beside Michael, her hand resting gently in his. They hadn't spoken much that day, both of them caught up in the aftermath of their confrontation with Marcus. But now, in the quiet of the evening, Michael could sense the exhaustion in her, the vulnerability she had allowed him to see. For the first time in weeks, she seemed like the woman he had married, the woman he had fallen in love with. "Sophia," Michael began, his voice soft, "I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I can ever truly understand everything you've been through, or everything you kept from me. But I do know this, you're not alone anymore." Sophia's eyes welled with tears at his words. She had carried so much shame for so long, trying to protect him, trying to protect their life together. She had feared that Michael would look at her and see nothing but the mistakes of her past. But now, with him by her side, she could feel the weight starting to lift, just a little. There was hope in his words, and in his presence. She wasn't alone anymore. "I'm so sorry, Michael," she whispered. "I never wanted this for us. I never wanted you to see me like this." Michael reached over and cupped her face gently, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I didn't marry you for your past, Sophia. I married you for who you are now. And I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. Together." She leaned into his touch, the warmth of his hand grounding her. She had been so afraid of losing him, of having him see the parts of her she had tried to bury. But now she realized that maybe their relationship wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about having no secrets, no pain, no flaws. It was about facing the imperfections and still choosing each other. It was about the willingness to heal together. "I don't know what's going to happen with Marcus," she said softly, "but I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. For you, for us. I don't want to be the person I was, Michael. I'm not her anymore." Michael squeezed her hand, his heart full of compassion. He had seen the woman Sophia was now, the woman who had tried to leave behind the mistakes of her past, who had chosen a better life, even though the ghosts of her past would always haunt her. He didn't want her to carry that burden alone. He wanted to help her heal, to face the consequences of the choices she had made, and to move forward together. "I know you're not her," he said quietly, "and I don't need you to be perfect, Sophia. I just need you to be here with me. Whatever happens, we'll get through it." The weight of the world seemed to lighten just a little in that moment. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning. They had faced the hardest truth of all, the truth that they couldn't escape the past, but that they could still build a future. It was a fragile future, one that would take time to rebuild, but it was one they could face together. They had crossed a line in their relationship, a line that had separated them from the darkness of Sophia's past and opened up a path to healing. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Marcus continued to make threats, but with the evidence they had gathered, the authorities were able to take action. He was arrested, his criminal empire dismantled piece by piece, as the truth about his illegal activities came to light. It was a bittersweet victory for Sophia. She had been forced to confront the man who had once held so much power over her, and in doing so, she had taken back control of her life. But the real work was at home, in the quiet moments when it was just Michael and Sophia, facing the truth of what had happened and rebuilding the trust they had once taken for granted. There were still moments of tension, moments when the scars from the past would resurface, but they worked through it, slowly, one conversation at a time. There were no shortcuts, no easy fixes, but they had something that was stronger than the pain of the past: love and the shared determination to heal. One evening, as they sat on the porch again watching the sunset, Sophia turned to Michael and smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months. "I never thought we'd get here," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. "I didn't think we could make it through this. But I'm so grateful we did. Grateful for you, Michael." He smiled back at her, his eyes filled with love and understanding. "We've been through a lot, but we're stronger for it. I'm proud of you, Sophia. Proud of us." They sat there, side by side, watching the world grow darker as the stars began to appear. There was still work to be done, still healing to be had, but in that moment it felt as though the future was a little brighter. Together, they had faced the storm, and together, they would rebuild. If you like this story, be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And if you enjoy stories that embraces your heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Let me know in the comments what stood out to you the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.